On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. Picture this, an old man on his deathbed. He's lived 90, maybe even 100 years. Sounds like a good run, right? But here's where it gets interesting. As he lies there, he decides to do something unusual. He starts tallying up his life like an accountant going through the books. How much time did he spend chasing money? How many years wasted trying to impress people who didn't really matter? How many days lost to pointless arguments or rushing around the city for obligations he didn't even care about? He thinks about all those plans that never materialized, the years swallowed by meaningless worries and fleeting pleasures, the time stolen by others while he wasn't even paying attention. And then it hits him like a freight train. He hasn't lived a long life at all. He's just existed for a long time. The years he can actually claim as his own? Shockingly few. In his final moments, he realizes he's dying young, not because his body gave out, but because he never really learned how to live. Now, I know this sounds pretty grim, but stick with me. This is actually one of the most freeing ideas you'll ever come across. It comes from a guy who lived nearly 2,000 years ago, right in the heart of the Roman Empire. His name was Lucius Annaeus Seneca. Seneca wasn't some ivory tower philosopher. This man was one of the richest people in Rome, advisor to the infamous Emperor Nero. He was a playwright, politician, and businessman who witnessed both the dazzling heights of power and the darkest depths of human cruelty. He wasn't theorizing from a quiet study. He was in the thick of it all, dealing with ambition, betrayal, and the constant shadow of death. Yet through all this chaos, he wrote letters and essays that have become a timeless guide to finding peace, purpose, and meaning. Today we're diving into his most powerful work, On the Shortness of Life. This isn't just a book. It's a manual for taking back your time and, by doing so, reclaiming your life. By the end of this journey, you'll understand the profound secret he discovered. Life isn't short at all. In fact, life is long, if you know how to use it. And you'll have the tools to start using yours right now. Vac. So where does this universal feeling come from? This constant complaint that life is just too short. You hear it everywhere. Even Hippocrates, the father of medicine, famously said, "Life is short, art is long." Aristotle complained that nature gave animals 5 or 10 human lifetimes, while we get shortchanged. It feels like we spend our whole lives just preparing to live, and then, boom, time's up. But Seneca looks at this complaint with a knowing smile. He tells us we've got it completely wrong. The problem isn't how much time nature gave us. The problem is us. It is not that we have a short time to live, he writes, but that we waste a lot of it. Think of it like this. Imagine you inherited a massive fortune. If you're careless and wasteful, you could blow through it in no time. But if you're wise and careful, even a modest amount could grow into something substantial. Our lives work exactly the same way. We're given a generous amount of time, enough for amazing achievements. But we waste it. We let it drain away on heedless luxury and activities that serve no real purpose. We're not short on time. We're just incredibly wasteful with it. So who are these thieves of our time? Seneca paints a vivid picture of Roman society, but it'll sound eerily familiar. He talks about the preoccupied. These are people who are constantly busy, but never actually productive in the art of living. There's the guy obsessed with making more money, never satisfied. The person drowning in wine or sluggish with idleness. The politician worn out by ambition, always at the mercy of what others think. The trader racing across land and sea, hoping for profit. The soldier, always inflicting or anxious about danger. The person exhausting themselves in thankless service to the powerful, hoping for a crumb of attention. So many people, he says, chase no real goal. They are just tossed around by shifting, inconsistent whims, never satisfied with themselves. They have no actual aim in life, and death catches them by surprise while they're still yawning. And here's one of his sharpest observations. It is a small part of life we really live. Indeed, all the rest is not life, but merely time. This is crucial. We can exist for decades, filling our days with activity, and still not actually live. Because living requires presence, purpose, and self-possession. The preoccupied have none of these. They're constantly being pulled away from themselves. He asks us to look at the people everyone envies. They're often the most miserable, crushed by their own success. The rich person who finds wealth a burden. The famous speaker, exhausted from constantly performing. The person surrounded by crowds, but with no freedom for themselves. Everyone is living for someone else. One person cultivates another, who cultivates someone else, but nobody bothers about themselves. We complain if an important person doesn't have time to see us, yet we never make time for ourselves. We'd fight tooth and nail over a property boundary, but when it comes to our lives, we let anyone and everyone encroach. We even invite in the very people who will take over our time. You'll find no one willing to share their money, he notes. But how many people does each of us divide our life among? We're stingy about protecting our possessions, but when it comes to squandering time, we're incredibly wasteful with the one thing we should hoard. This is the heart of our problem. We don't value our time because it's intangible. We can't see it or hold it, so we treat it like it's cheap, almost worthless. People will work for a paycheck or a pension, but nobody calculates what their time is really worth. They use it carelessly, as if it costs nothing. But let that same person face a terminal diagnosis, and watch them pray to doctors, willing to spend everything just for a little more time. So what causes this massive blind spot? Seneca says it's because we live as if we're immortal. We never think about our own fragility. We don't notice how much time has already slipped by. We squander it as though we have an endless supply, even though the very day we're giving to someone or something else might be our last. This leads to his most famous observation: you act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire. Think about that. When it comes to things like public speaking or taking risks, we're paralyzed by mortal fear. We worry about embarrassment, failure, and judgment. But when it comes to our desires, we act like we have infinite time. You hear it all the time. When I'm 50, I'll finally take it easy. When I'm 60, I'll step back from work. And Seneca asks, what guarantee do you have of a longer life? Who promised your plans will work out? Aren't you ashamed to keep only the scraps of your life for yourself, devoting to wisdom only the time you can't spend on anything else? How absurdly late to begin, really living just when life must end. This is the trap of someday. We put off our real lives, always waiting for a future that's never promised. He calls this the biggest waste of life. It steals each day as it comes and sacrifices the present by promising the future. The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. The whole future is uncertain, he urges. Live now. To drive this home, he tells stories of the most powerful men of his time, people who seemed to have it all but were caught in this very trap. He talks about Augustus, the first Roman emperor, a man the gods blessed more than anyone. Yet Augustus never stopped praying for rest, seeking relief from public affairs. His greatest hope was for leisure. He'd console himself during exhausting work by thinking about the day he could finally please himself. The man who controlled the fate of nations was happiest dreaming of laying down his power. But it was a dream he could never grasp. He was a prisoner of the empire he'd built. Then there's Cicero, one of history's greatest orators and statesmen. Tossed around by violent political storms, caught between enemies and uncertain friends, he tried to hold the collapsing state together but was ultimately swept away. In his later years, defeated and despairing, he wrote from his villa calling himself a, quote, semi-prisoner. Here was a man of immense talent who felt trapped and unfulfilled, cursing the very position he'd once celebrated. He tells the story of Livius Drusus, a bold and ambitious politician who was a firebrand from youth. So busy making a name for himself, he's said to have cursed his life, saying he alone had never had a holiday, not even as a child. His relentless ambition led to public and private trouble, and he died violently, complaining he'd never had a real break. These aren't just ancient Roman stories. They're timeless warnings. Power, wealth, and fame are no defense against feeling like you've wasted your life. In fact, they often make it worse. These men had everything the world could offer, but they lacked the one thing that mattered: ownership of their own time. And Seneca points out that being preoccupied isn't just for emperors and senators. It takes many forms, some deceptively quiet. You can't call someone leisurely if they're just idly preoccupied. Do you call someone leisurely who spends all day anxiously arranging expensive bronze statues? Or the guy who sits at wrestling matches, intensely following fights between boys? What about the person who spends hours at the barber, debating every single hair, carefully training his thinning locks to lie perfectly? He gets furious if the barber is careless, as if they were trimming someone important. Seneca scoffs. Which of them wouldn't rather have his country disturbed than his hair? He describes people who spend all their time composing, listening to, or learning songs, always humming. Or the anxious host of an elaborate dinner party, fussing over the silverware, checking on the cook, making sure servants move with perfect precision. Their lives aren't leisure, but idle occupation. He even tells a story, maybe an exaggeration, but powerful, of a man so lost in self-indulgence that after being carried from his bath and placed in his chair, he had to ask his servants, "Am I sitting down now?" A man who doesn't even know if he's sitting, Seneca asks, how can he know if he's alive? How can he control any of his time? This man isn't leisurely, he's ill, or even dead. Then there's the obsession with useless knowledge. The person who can tell you exactly how many oarsmen Ulysses had, or which Roman general first included elephants in a triumph. Seneca admits these facts can be interesting, but they don't make you a better person. Knowing that Pompey staged a battle with 18 elephants doesn't help you control your passions or become more just. It's another form of preoccupation, filling time without actually living. So if all these people, the powerful, ambitious, idle, rich trivia experts, aren't truly living, then who is? According to Seneca, only one group truly lives: those who make time for philosophy. Now, when he says philosophy, he doesn't mean dry academic study. For Seneca and the Stoics, philosophy was a way of life. It was the art of living itself. The philosopher, he says, isn't confined by the same boundaries as others. They're free from the laws limiting the human race. How? Because they add every age to their own. All the years before them become part of their life. This is beautiful and profound. Through study, the philosopher enters a partnership with every age. They can argue with Socrates, question with Carneades, seek retirement with Epicurus, and overcome human nature with the Stoics. They have access to the greatest minds that ever lived. Think about someone rushing around the city trying to greet every important person. How few can they actually see? How many will be too busy or self-important to give them time? But the philosopher has different friends. They can choose Zeno, Pythagoras, Democritus, and Aristotle as their closest companions every single day. These friends are never too busy. They never send you away empty-handed. Their conversation is never dangerous, their friendship never fatal, and their wisdom freely given. You can take whatever you want from them. In one of the most moving passages, Seneca says we're used to saying we couldn't choose our parents, that they were given to us by chance, but we can choose whose intellectual children we'd like to be. There are households of the noblest minds. Choose the one you want to be adopted into, and you'll inherit not just their name but their wisdom too. And this inheritance isn't guarded stingily. The more it's shared, the greater it becomes. This is the path to a long life. The philosopher's life extends widely because it's not limited to their own short existence. They grasp the past through memory, use the present, and anticipate the future. This combination of all times into one creates a long life. But for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future, life is inevitably short and anxious. When they reach the end, the poor souls realize too late that for all their busy activity, they've been preoccupied with doing nothing. So the first part of the solution is a radical perspective shift. It's realizing your time is your most precious, non-renewable resource, and the only way to make life feel long and meaningful is to invest that time in wisdom, in understanding how to live. But you might be thinking, that's great when things are going well. What about when everything falls apart? When you face loss, poverty, or disgrace? How can you talk about a long, happy life then? This is where Seneca's philosophy becomes not just interesting, but essential. It becomes a shield against life's inevitable storms. And he speaks from experience. He wrote one of his most powerful essays, The Consolation to Helvia, to his own mother while in exile, stripped of wealth and status, living on a barren island. He was comforting her from the heart of his own suffering, showing us how a wise person endures misfortune. The secret, he reveals, is preparation. Never have I trusted fortune, he writes, even when she seemed to offer peace. All her gifts, money, public office, influence, he treated as temporary loans. He kept a wide gap between them and his true self, so when fortune came to reclaim them, she could take them without tearing away a piece of him. He understood that no one is shattered by fortune's blows unless they were first deceived by her favors. People who collapse are those who believed her gifts were theirs forever. But the person not puffed up in good times doesn't collapse when they change. Their strength has been tested. In prosperity, they've already prepared for adversity. This is negative visualization. It's not pessimism, it's realism. It's mentally preparing for the loss of what you value. This achieves two things. You appreciate what you have more, and you rob loss of its power to destroy you. So when he finds himself in exile, he can analyze it with a clear mind. What is exile, really? Just a change of place. He looks around and sees that most people in Rome came from somewhere else. The human race is always moving. Nothing stays where it was born. Why should a change of location be catastrophic? He reminds his mother that two things always accompany us wherever we go: universal nature and our own virtue. Whatever is best for a human being lies outside human control. It can't be given or taken away. The world, nature's most glorious creation, and the human mind that can wonder at it, these are our everlasting possessions. As long as we have these, we're never truly in exile. From any point on earth, the distance to the heavens is the same. What about poverty? He argues there's no evil in poverty, unless you've reached the crazy state of greed and luxury. The body's needs are few: warmth, food to banish hunger and thirst. Anything more serves our vices, not our needs. He contrasts this with the absurd luxury of his time. Pretentious kitchens stocked with birds hunted from beyond Roman frontiers. Food brought from the furthest seas that their weakened stomachs can barely receive. They vomit to eat, and eat to vomit, he says with disgust. To someone who rejects all that, what harm can poverty do? It can even be a cure, forcing you back to a simpler, healthier life. He tells the story of Apicius, a famous gourmand who spent 100 million sesterces in his kitchen. When he checked his accounts and realized he'd only have 10 million left, he decided living on such a sum would be starvation, so he poisoned himself. For this man, 10 million was poverty. This shows, Seneca says, it's not the amount of money that matters, but your attitude. The mind creates our wealth, and it goes with us into exile. The soul can never suffer exile because it's free, akin to the gods, and can encompass all of heaven and time. What about disgrace? Can a wise person be affected by what others think? Not if they rely on themselves and hold aloof from common beliefs. He tells the story of Socrates, who went to prison with the same expression he wore when he defied the 30 tyrants. His presence robbed the prison of disgrace, because a place where Socrates was couldn't seem like a prison. No one, Seneca argues, is despised by another unless they first despise themselves. This is the Stoic shield. By preparing for misfortune, understanding what's truly ours and what's merely on loan from fortune, and cultivating inner virtue, we can become invulnerable. The mind, once strengthened by virtue, becomes a fortress nothing external can breach. But even with this shield, life can feel unsettling. We might not be in full crisis, but we can still feel adrift. This brings us to Seneca's third great theme, the search for tranquility. He frames this as a reply to his friend Serenus, who writes with an incredibly relatable problem. Serenus says he's not really sick, but he's not well either. He's not gripped by vices, but not free of them. He describes his condition brilliantly. I am harried not by a tempest, but by seasickness. He's in constant low-grade anxiety and dissatisfaction. He loves simplicity, a modest home, and inexpensive clothes. But then he sees a rich person's lavish house with glittering servants and precious stones, and his vision wavers. He doesn't become worse, but he comes back sadder, wondering if that other life is better. He decides to enter public service to help others, but then some trivial annoyance makes him want to retreat to his study. He wants to write for himself, but then gets inspired and becomes ambitious for fame. He feels like he's always on the verge of falling. Seneca tells him he needs what the Greeks called euthymia, which he translates as tranquility. This is a state where the mind follows a smooth, steady course, well disposed to itself, with no ups and downs, its inner peace. So how do we find it? Seneca offers practical, psychological remedies. First, know yourself. You must honestly assess yourself. We usually overestimate our abilities. Some people are too shy for politics. Some are too hot-tempered. Some can't resist making dangerous, witty remarks. For all these people, retirement and quiet life are better than public activity. Your nature must suit your tasks. Don't labor against your own disposition. Second, choose your company wisely. Nothing delights the mind like loyal friendship. But he warns us to choose friends as free from strong desires as possible. Vices spread insidiously. Just as during a plague you wouldn't sit next to someone sick, in choosing friends, find those least corrupted. But he's realistic. He's not saying only associate with perfect people. Where would you find them? In the current shortage of good people, you must accept the least bad. But one crucial piece of advice: especially avoid those who are gloomy and always complaining. A companion who's agitated and groaning about everything is an enemy to peace of mind. Third, be flexible. We mustn't pin our hopes too much on set plans. We must be able to move to what chance brings us, without dreading change in our purpose or condition. Obstinacy brings wretchedness. But even worse is fickleness that never settles on anything. Both are hostile to tranquility. Fourth, find the right balance between solitude and society. We should withdraw into ourselves often, because associating with people unlike us can upset our calm. But we must also mingle with crowds. The two are remedies for each other. Solitude cures our distaste for crowds, and crowds cure our boredom with solitude. Fifth, allow your mind to relax. The mind shouldn't be kept continuously at the same pitch of concentration. It needs amusing diversions. Socrates wasn't ashamed to play with small children, and the great statesman Cato would soothe his mind with wine when tired from cares of state. Our minds must relax. They'll rise better and keener after rest. He encourages walks outdoors, journeys, socializing, and even occasionally getting intoxicated. Drink washes away cares and stirs the mind to its depths. But he cautions not to do this often, lest the mind acquire a bad habit. Moderation is key. And finally, perhaps his most profound advice for finding peace in a chaotic world is to change your perspective on human folly. When you look at the world, it's easy to hate humanity. You see how rare simplicity is, how unknown innocence is. You see successful crimes, limitless ambition, and destructive lust. It can drive the mind into darkness. The solution, he says, is to regard all these common vices as not hateful, but ridiculous. We should imitate Democritus, who laughed whenever he went out, rather than Heraclitus, who wept. One saw all human activities as follies, the other as sorrows. It's more civilized, Seneca concludes, to make fun of life than to cry over it. The person who laughs at the world deserves better of humanity than the one who grieves, because they allow it some hope, while the other laments things that can never be fixed. This shift from anger and sorrow to tolerant, amused perspective is powerful for maintaining tranquility. It lets you engage with the world without being destroyed by its imperfections. And through all of this, managing our time, building fortitude, seeking tranquility, runs one final essential thread: knowing how to die. He says whoever doesn't know how to die well will live badly. We must reckon life as something cheap. Fear of dying often causes death, because it makes us act cowardly. Whoever knows death was the condition at conception will live on those terms. He tells the incredible story of Julius Canis, condemned to death by the mad Emperor Caligula. When the emperor told him, "I've ordered your execution," Canis simply replied, "I thank you, noble emperor." In the 10 days before his execution, he showed no anxiety. When the centurion came to get him, he was playing a game of drafts. He calmly counted his pieces, turned to his opponent, and said, "See that you don't falsely claim after my death that you won." Then, nodding to the centurion, he said, "You'll be my witness that I'm leading by 1 piece." Walking to his execution, his philosophy teacher asked what he was thinking. Canis replied, "I've decided to take note whether in that fleeting moment the spirit is aware of its departure from the body." He was using his own death as a final philosophical experiment. This is ultimate tranquility. A mind so at peace with itself and with the nature of life and death that it can face its end not with fear but with curiosity and even irony. This is the goal. This is the life Seneca holds out for us. A life where we're masters of our own time. A life where we're fortified against the worst fortune can throw at us. A life where we possess deep and unshakable inner peace. A life measured not by its years, but by its meaning. A life that is, by any true measure, long. A life by its ye. As we reach the end of Seneca's wisdom, you can't help feeling how incredibly modern, how urgent, his message is. He was writing 2,000 years ago about the dangers of being, quote, preoccupied, distracted, giving away our time to trivialities. But if he could see our world today, with smartphones buzzing in our pockets, 24/7 work culture, endless social media feeds, he'd likely say the disease he diagnosed has become a global pandemic. We've invented machines of preoccupation more powerful than anything a Roman emperor could have imagined. That's why this book is more than interesting history. It's a vital antidote for our times. For me, 3 lessons from Seneca stand out as most powerful and necessary for us today. First is the radical idea that your time is your only true possession. Everything else, money, property, reputation, even health, can be taken in an instant, but your time, and how you choose to invest it, is fundamentally yours to control, right until the very end. This idea forces hard questions. Am I the custodian of my own life, or am I letting it be plundered by things that don't matter? Am I living, or just passing time? The second great lesson is that the goal is tranquility, not happiness. In our culture, we're obsessed with pursuing happiness, which we often define as excitement, pleasure, or peak experiences. But Seneca, like all Stoics, knew this kind of happiness is fleeting and depends on external things. It's fragile. Tranquility, on the other hand, is different. It's stable, resilient inner peace. It's the calm sea, not the exciting wave. It's something you can cultivate within yourself, a fortress that can withstand life's storms. Shifting your goal from happiness to tranquility can fundamentally change how you live. And third is the life-changing practice of fortitude through preparation. Mentally rehearsing for hardship, imagining loss of what you love, can seem dark or pessimistic at first, but it's actually one of the most powerful paths to gratitude and resilience. By reminding yourself everything is temporary, you learn to appreciate it more deeply in the present, and you build inner strength that makes you less fragile, less easily broken when life, as it inevitably will, deals you a heavy blow. So how can you start applying these ancient lessons to your life, starting today? Here are 3 simple, practical actions. 1. Conduct a time audit. For just 1 day, be a ruthless accountant of your time. Keep a small notebook or note on your phone, and be honest. Where did your minutes and hours actually go? How much time scrolling? How much in meetings going nowhere? How much worrying about things you can't control? And most importantly, how much time was for you, for quiet reflection, learning, something that truly nourished your soul? Don't judge yourself. Just observe. The awareness alone is a powerful first step. 2. Schedule philosophy. If you don't schedule your leisure, the world will schedule it for you with preoccupations. So put it on your calendar. It could be 30 minutes every morning to read a great book, a walk in nature without your phone, time spent journaling. Treat this appointment with yourself as seriously as an appointment with your doctor or boss. It's non-negotiable time to work on the art of living. 3. Practice the Stoic pause. Next time you feel angry, anxious, or pulled into pointless drama, try this. Before reacting, just pause. Take one deep breath. In that small space between trigger and response, you have a choice. You can ask, is this worth my time? Is this within my control? Will reacting with anger serve any good purpose? This small habit of pausing before reacting is the beginning of reclaiming your inner peace and self-possession. The ultimate message of On the Shortness of Life is profound empowerment. It tells us we're not helpless victims of a fleeting existence. We're custodians of a vast and generous gift. The life we have is long enough. The question Seneca leaves us with, a question echoing across 2 millennia, is this: what will you do with it? Will you let it be squandered? Or will you invest it wisely in a life of purpose, fortitude, and tranquility? The choice is yours. That was the summary of On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. We've touched on the great peaks of his wisdom today, but I'll be honest, a summary can only ever be a map. The real magic happens when you walk the territory yourself. It's in the quiet moments when one of his sentences lands unexpectedly, or a particular story resonates deep within you. This journey was designed to help you see if this path is worth exploring. If anything we've talked about today sparked something in you, I encourage you to pick up the book. Reading it isn't just learning. It's an experience, a conversation with one of history's wisest minds that can genuinely change how you see your time, and therefore, your life. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this exploration valuable, it would mean the world if you could hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.